Good morning, Club Wealth. I am Michael Hellickson. Just kidding. I am Brian Curtis, and I'm sitting in for Michael Hellickson today, who's off speaking at an Explode conference, is my understanding. So we've experienced technical difficulties this morning, but we are going to push through. We have a great guest. Neal's going to talk to us today about Home Partners of America and a great way to leverage another part of your business. So I'm just going to start with a real simple question. Neal, tell us what Home Partners of America is, and we'll kind of go from there.
Hey, Brian, thanks so much for having me. So Home Partners of America is a right to purchase program. So their big goal is to get more people into home ownership. So they basically take renters and turn them into home buyers through getting them into a home now that they have access to purchasing at some point throughout their term living there.
Gotcha. So with a program like that, I guess the first and most important question for probably the majority of the people watching today is, how does that help me? So I've got this guy who can't buy a house for what reason? And again, maybe before we even get there, tell me some of the criteria of the people that you're putting in this. So obviously, for whatever reason, either income or credit or something is keeping these people from buying today. They would love to be buyers, is my understanding.
Yep.
But unfortunately, they're held back by something. So what are some of the things that are holding them back, and what are some of the criteria that I can use to get some of these people into homes?
Very good question. So most of the clients that we run into, the minimum requirements for Home Partners is 550 plus credit score, no evictions within the last 3 years. They actually allow bankruptcies as long as it's been discharged. So if it's been discharged at least 1 day, they will allow that. Same with foreclosures and short sales, as long as those have been completed. And at least the minimum requirement for income is 50,000 adjusted gross income for the household to get approved for the program.
Okay. So are they looking at debt to income ratio? Because I'm guessing I don't want to put somebody in a house who has a 97% debt to income ratio. Correct. Because they're never buying that house unless they get rid of a bunch of debt or, I guess, got more income. That would.
Correct. Good question. So they really focus on renters that have the power and the want to purchase the property. Now, they don't go into a crazy underwriting process like mortgage origination, but they will take into account debt to income ratio at some level.
Okay. Do you have any idea what they're like? So I can tell you right now, as someone who was in the mortgage business for a long time,
yep.
Your conventional stuff is running around 45 debt to income ratio, 45%. I've seen government stuff go up as high as 60, but 60 yep. That's a real exception for all the agents watching out there. Don't try and get all your people into 60% DTI. There's a lot of moving parts for that, but that's as high as I've seen it gone. Do they have any kind of maximum minimum type thing?
I've tried to figure out the algorithm for it, and it's not there. The best thing to do is just have them apply. Typically, when I talk to a tenant, future resident, Home Partners gets them approved for a little bit more than what they want to spend for rent.
Okay.
So, Home Partners, like I said, does take that into account. They do look for 2.5 to 3 times monthly rent as income, and then take into account the car payments and stuff of that nature. They don't focus on student loan debt or medical debt.
Okay, so they're looking at it from a perspective similar to what the banks are. I mean, the banks look at student loan debt, but they're not going to necessarily look at it as strongly as other debt. And oftentimes you can defer that, not count it at all. So
correct.
Sounds like they're using a similar model, maybe hybrided a little bit. So, let's talk about what this really looks like. If I've got a client who, let's say they've got a 575 credit score, they've been trying to get their credit up, can't quite get it up. And I would say, okay, great. We've got this program for you. What does that look like? What's their process? How challenging it is for them? How challenging is it for us as agents?
Very good question. So it's very simple for the agent as long as you do it the right way. So what I've learned doing this for 2.5, 3 years is depending on what their rent budget is, the only thing I really care about, and this is critical, is their timing, right? So obviously we have to purchase a home. We have at least 2 weeks, depending on the city, if there's a rental inspection that's required, of make ready costs for home partners to go in and change the locks, make sure it's leaseholder ready. So the timing is the biggest thing with home partners, and making sure that the tenant isn't strapped for time. Like if they have to move in 5 weeks because their lease expires, it's just not fair to put your tenant through that. But if they're flexible month to month, then you start showing them houses based on the rent amount that they want to pay on a monthly basis. Show them houses for sale. They love the idea. That's been my biggest learning curve is if I go in, just like a listing presentation, you never want to try and sell someone about your listing awesomeness, right? Or home partners over the phone. It just doesn't work, right?
Amen.
So showing them houses has been probably the biggest helper, if you will, with my success with home partners is when you find them a rental that basically someone else will purchase and lease to them, and it's like an immaculate home that's for sale, they'll do whatever it takes to get it, right? And then obviously they'll be in better hands, right? They have a national property management company that manages the property and make sure that it's in tip-top shape when they move in. So tenants seem to love that. Once you find them a house that they want, you get them to apply for the program. That's one big difference between me and a lot of other agents that do this program is I will show them the house. I'll find them a house that they want, and then just send them a link to apply for the program, get approved for the program. Then as agents, we submit all the information to home partners that they need to correctly assess the value. And then they run their numbers on what they feel the house is worth, comparables, rent market in that city, et cetera. And then they send over documentation to the tenant, basically approved, saying, hey, do you agree to this rent amount, this purchase price? One cool thing about home partners, guys, is like they're super overly transparent.
Good.
So, which is good. So they will let you know what the year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rent price is and the year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 purchase price. Because both of those, depending on what city and state you're in, go up 3 to 5% each year.
Okay, so they're just basically trying to stay with market trend. They're not trying to gouge somebody. They're saying rent goes up 3%, values go up 3%, and do that. So you said something very interesting. You said that once you find them a house, then they apply. So here would be my question to you. Have you gone out and shown somebody 25 houses and found out they don't qualify?
Yep.
Okay.
I have. And again, that's where the learning curve is. I go based on rent. I found out that if you are willing to pay more than $2,000 a month in rent, you are more apt to qualify for the program. And the reason I do that, I promise it's not about the money, because obviously the rent dictates the purchase price, but it doesn't hurt. But I think especially with the Club Wall family, all the coaches, we all feel like if we say we can help someone, we better be able to. So I feel more confident being able to help someone that is able to pay more in rent, just because the housing quality, when you're looking at $1,250 a month rent compared to $2,500 a month rent, you might get 7 offers approved or under contract at $1,250 a month, but home partners won't end up purchasing them because of it's not move-in ready, etc.
So let's talk a little bit of price point in your market, because we're talking numbers. We're talking, $1,250, $2,000, but each market's different. Like I've got a team in Arkansas, and $250,000 buys me a good size house there. I live in Boulder, Colorado now, and $250,000 buys you a garage. So, I mean, it's a lot different market to market. So tell me a little bit about your market as far as, so we can kind of talk apples to apples. So, what's the average sales price that you guys have in your market?
Good question. So we're right around 300,000.
Okay.
For Home Partners of America, 3,000 a month rent dictates their highest purchase price in the Twin Cities, which is 450,000. Now I would, once you guys start getting familiar with Home Partners, go to their website, sign up as an agent, become certified. They have a video course that you can take to learn more about the program, and then learn your specific metro markets that participate in Home Partners, because it's not everywhere.
Absolutely. Like, I know I can tell you right now, it's in Denver, but it's not in my market in Arkansas. So
Correct.
yes, there's definitely places. So let's look at your average sales price is $300,000. And I mean, I can tell you, and I'm assuming 100% financing here. I just did some quick math on my calculator. So if you were financing $300,000, so if you're a VA buyer, let's say, because obviously there's not a lot of 100% programs out there, you're looking for principal and interest right around $1,380 a month. And then of course you have taxes and insurance. So, for you, an average person spending $300,000, approximately what would their house payment be if they were to purchase a house? They have good credit.
Very good question. So I'll take care of that. Home Partners is not a lender.
Right.
So you have to get approved, obviously, from a third-party lender to figure out what the payments would be for the renter. But are you asking like what the rent?
Just like, I got a guy who's got an 800 credit score, has been at his job for 20 years. He wants to buy a $300,000 house. He's VA, so he's not putting anything down. What's that guy making on a monthly payment? Is it $1,500, $1,800, $2,000? About where does that fall?
Is that for the rent?
No. Just a regular buyer. I'm sorry, I'm changing the subject on you. I apologize. Just if you had a regular buyer, you were going to buy a house, and you were going to buy a house for $300,000, finance $300,000, approximately what would the mortgage payment be? What I'm trying to do is let the audience take a look at what a mortgage payment would be for a person who has great credit versus the rental payment through Home Partners of America. Because here's the thing that I've found with renters, that sometimes we tell them stuff and they're like, well, why can't I have this? My buddy just bought a $300,000 house and he pays $1,700 a month. Why am I paying $2,500?
Yeah.
We need to be able to cover that objection, and I'm sure you have a process for that. I'm just trying to compare apples to apples.
Yeah. So always, if they're able to purchase a property, that's always going to be the best option. The rent's going to be more. With Home Partners, none of the rent goes towards the principal. So if they are wanting to purchase the property, they should do it as soon as possible. They can actually exercise the right to purchase anytime after 90 days of moving in.
Okay,
so
cool.
At that $300,000 price point, you're looking at $2,500 a month, probably, be my guess.
And then so if I was a purchaser, I'm a good credit person, I'm going to pay about $2,000 a month. If I'm a 550 with Home Partners, that same exact house, how much am I going to rent it for? That's what I'm trying to compare.
Good question, my friend. So with that, it's different. It's interesting. Another algorithm that Home Partners has takes into account, of course, more than likely, mostly the list price. And then you have taxes for that area and whether or not it's a finished basement. And in some states, they allow purchasing of pools. I'm sure for insurance purposes that gets taken into account as well. 300,000, we're looking at anywhere from 2,000 to 2,500 a month.
For rent?
Yep. Probably closer to 2,200.
So you're probably looking at maybe paying 10% more than what you'd pay if you had good credit and purchased it outright. And that's what I'm trying to get at. So that's something I'm assuming that you cover with people. Say, look, you're going to pay a premium, but you also have the option to purchase it anytime in the next 5 years. And by the way, we've got you in a house. You don't have to move again. What are some of the objections that you hear, and how are you dealing with them, I guess?
I would say the biggest objection that we would run into is the deposit. So having a property management company, I know that most security deposits are 1 month's rent, plus first month's rent to move in. And then for Home Partners, it's 2 months rent deposit, which is fully refundable with interest. So when they move out, Home Partners has to give them their deposit back, barring any damages, of course. So it is kind of a small fortune to get into it. But again, when you're working with people that are willing to pay $2,500 a month, it's less of an issue than someone at $1,250 a month, etc.
Absolutely.
So that's the big objection that we have. The moving time, the timing, having to wait 6-7 weeks is sometimes hard for them to be able to do if they're in a lease that expires.
Okay. So where are you getting the majority of your leads from this? It sounds like this is something you're doing on a pretty regular basis. Getting poorly qualified people is not the most challenging thing, but at the same point in time, my guess is you're still looking for a certain person. Are they people who are coming up organically through other lead generation, or are you actually marketing to these people?
Very good question. And I definitely wanted to touch on that. So doing tenant placement. So anyone that's on here that has property management that's in a home partner's market, it's like so mandatory that you guys get versed in this, because if you're showing, or your team is showing, houses for rent, and obviously you have the responsibility of your client, the owner of the property, to try and get his property rented. If that tenant doesn't like that property, hey, you know what? I have another option. I actually I partner with an investor that will purchase properties that are for sale, might get you a little bit nicer house. I'll send you a list. Another critical key that I do differently is I send them a list of the MLS. I don't send them to home partners, because then they start reading and, oh, it's a scam or whatever. So I send them a list of properties to go look at through the MLS and say, hey, this is within your rent budget. Let me know which ones you want to go take a look at. So nice. Doing the tenant placement thing. And then guys, when you have listings that are in a home partner's market, and that's my little gift for you guys today, is my addition to my listing presentation I added to remind you to talk about home partners when you're in a listing presentation. Current listings that you have, if you just market on Zillow, you'll get enough leads to possibly double end that deal. And that's the big.
So explain that to me a little bit more. I appreciate that. So I'm the seller, and you're sitting with me. You've gone through the rest of your listing presentation. You say, oh, by the way, I have this really cool program that I do with Home Partners of America. Pitch to me like I'm sitting like I'm the seller, so I can understand it, so our audience can see what you're saying.
Awesome. Yeah. So Mr. Seller, we partner with an investor that will actually purchase properties once me as an agent finds a renter. So what that means to you is giving us permission to market your property for rent. It will not overlap any of the for sale marketing, but that gives us, in the Twin Cities, it's actually 54% more people in the pie of people looking for housing are looking to rent. So we're actually doubling your odds of finding someone to purchase your property. We've done hundreds of transactions with home partners, and it's very slick. It's a no-brainer. So basically, I just get permission from them to allow us to market the property for rent, and then we do both rental and for sale marketing on the property. And they love the idea.
Do you have any sort of I'm an infographics guy. The odd thing about me is I'm not a visual learner, but I also understand that 70% of the population is. So do you have like an infographic that shows this is the number of people potentially who could buy your house, and then this is the number of people who could buy and rent, like a pie graph?
You got it. Yep. If you go to, I believe Tara said it was clubwealth.com//Neal Lawson, you'll be able to download the exact infographic that I use in my listing presentation. Not branded, so you guys can brand it to your own. So I put that together for my listing presentation and figured I could share that with you. Has the stats on there with the pie chart showing that we more than double your odds to sell your property.
So with that in mind, let's talk seller marketing a little bit. So I understand in a listing presentation, but one of the biggest problems that we have in our industry is not necessarily closing in the listing presentation, although I'm sure some of us could get better at that, including me. But the goal is to get in front of more sellers. So are you using any sort of marketing with Home Partners of America to get in front of more sellers?
Good question. So it's a very easy pitch when we're talking to people on the phone for sale by owners, expireds, because we have that. No one else is doing this. And there's 3 out of 5 of the top producing Home Partners agents in the Twin Cities for Home Partners. I mean, you guys have a crazy advantage not being in the Twin Cities, because the competition here is fierce. But my point is sellers haven't heard this. So if you're telling them, hey, you have an investor that'll purchase your property for cash within 3 weeks, I just have to find a tenant, like, they're all ears. So it gets you at the table, and then you can explain, obviously, your seller package, and then including the Home Partners of America piece as well.
So I'm calling an expired and I say, hey, Mr. Expired, this is Brian Curtis with HomeQuest Realty, and I'm just reaching out to you. I saw your house expired on the MLS, and I've got a really cool program that might be able to sell your house in a very quick period of time. I'd love to sit down and meet with you. Is that something, what's your scripting?
Yeah, that's pretty much it, Brian. Just getting them intrigued and letting them know, like, we're different, right? That's the biggest thing. No one's been able to advertise his property the way we will. So getting the appointment with something exactly like you just said is perfect. And then you can walk him through, obviously, the for sale stuff, the 44-point listing presentation, right? And then the Home Partners of America stuff.
Okay, so that's an expired. What are you saying to Fizbos? Because obviously some Fizbos, the whole reason they didn't list is they're trying to save money. They don't want to pay an agent, different things like that. So let's talk Fizbo marketing for them. So I call that Fizbo up, and what am I going to say to that person to get them to potentially meet with me?
Perfect. So prefacing, all I want is permission to market their property. Okay. Best case, I get the listing, right? But all I want is permission to market their property. I know I'm going to get at least 1 or 2 Home Partners leads and hopefully be able to purchase that property with Home Partners. Worst case, I get 2 or 3 Home Partners leads that I convert to Home Partners and we buy a different house. Doesn't matter. So I'm just letting them know, like, hey, I have potential to purchase your property. I'm not looking for a listing. When would be a good time to sit down and see if this would be a good fit to help you market your property, because it is free. And again, all I want is a listing. If I show them value and start actually generating leads and showing the property, now you're top of mind, right? Maybe doing an open house for them, and then you'll end up getting the listing.
Okay, so basically
it's Home Partners.
Yeah, so basically it's, hey, Mr. Fizbo, I'm reaching out to you. I've got a program where we have investors that buy houses. I'd love to come over and take a look at it. I'll show you how our program works. You can get an idea of what we're doing. And I'm assuming that you ask them to pay you, if I bring you a buyer,
correct? Yeah.
Will you pay us a commission?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And that's a real important thing. Now, here's an interesting question for you, Neal, though. Would you be willing to market someone's house who wasn't thrilled with doing that? They weren't, well, I don't necessarily want to deal with that. Is that something that you would do just to get to, because like you said, I'm getting 2, 3, 4 potential leads off of that property. If someone says, no, I'm not interested in doing that, would you still market their property?
I would, for sure, with permission. Yeah, and most of them will pay something, but again, I mean, we had one rental last year, $1,650 a month, so not even in my crazy good range. We placed a tenant there, obviously, and had 4 Home Partners transactions from it. So you never know which listing, rental or sale listing is going to pop off. You just want as many as you possibly can, working the leads correctly,
Okay. Well, that's great. I mean, and here's what I love about what Neal just said. He's not looking at one sale. And I feel like sometimes agents get stuck. They're like, well, if that seller won't pay me, I don't want to deal with him. He's a jerk, blah, 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 blah. But one of the things, if you guys are out there dealing with Fizbos, try to understand the mentality of a Fizbo.
Yeah.
A Fizbo, they're not always a jerk. And if there's just a lot of people who say, oh, I'm sick of those Fizbos, they're jerks, they don't respect us. Here's the thing. There are people out there just like each and every one of us trying to save a little bit of money. They probably don't understand the real estate process. They've sold 2 houses in the last 15 years. It is a seller's market in most of the country right now. So the truth of the matter is it's not that hard to sell a house. So that doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity there. I did this for years back in the boom in 05 and 06, where basically I marketed Fizbo houses for free all the time. I didn't even have a cool program like Neal has, but I marketed those and I didn't take a commission. I offered to manage the transaction if it went under contract for 1%.
Exactly.
But for every house that I marketed, I probably sold 3 houses. So, and again, I'm not interested in working for free. That's not what I'm suggesting, but please understand there are ways to create business using other people's properties. And it's just a different way to do it. Here's another thing for you guys out there who do this. If I were to go on a Fizbo appointment and they didn't want to list their house, but they agreed to market it, another thing that I'm going to do I'm going to ask them, can I put a lockbox on your house? And here's why. Because my thought is that, and then we train them a little bit. So, you know, you've dealt with Fizbos. Realistically, if 10 people call a Fizbo, how many of them are agents, Neal?
Yeah.
6, 7, 8 out of 10 are probably agents. So it's a really cool trick. You put a lockbox on their house and you give them this script. Guys, are you sick and tired of dealing with all these agents who are really just coming over trying to list your house? And of course they are. And then you say to them, here's a simple thing. I'll put a lockbox on your house. And next time somebody calls you and says, hey, I want to, I want to come over and look at your house. Great. There's a lockbox on the front door. What time are you going to be there? Now you've eliminated that client meeting with another agent, and the client didn't want to meet with an agent. They just want to sell their flipping house. They don't want to go to 17 listing appointments a month that they thought were somebody bringing them a house, because we all know the script. I'll be in your neighborhood next week. I have a buyer. No, you don't. So anyway, just an interesting aside as we look at that. What other kind of marketing are you doing? Are you doing any direct marketing like Craigslist or Facebook or any of that type of stuff?
I am not. So we used to do Facebook marketing, and if you're not smart with it, you'll get inundated with hundreds of leads a day. I mean, you could spend your whole day responding back to people that make $50,000 a year as a family, but they want to rent, $2,000 a month houses, right? Or you just get people come out of the woodwork when you advertise on Craigslist for sure. If you just search your city for Craigslist, I know in the Twin Cities, it's just inundated with home partner stuff. So people are they're not about it anymore. So most of our marketing, and that's why I wanted to talk about listings. Another way to market properties, guys, and this is so critical. If you work with investors who are flipping properties, you can check with your local MLS boards or whatever, but coming soons have been huge. So we get to market it and possibly sell it before it even hits the market through home partners.
Okay. So
we'll market the property for rent. There's a way, if you want, Brian, I can show you exactly how I look up a property, what it would be worth. Absolutely. Or what it would rent for. So let me share my screen here and I'll show everyone what I do here. So this is where the areas are that's allowed. So I can send that, I posted it in the group. I can post it again so everyone knows where Home Partners exists. And let me pull up the site. So if you just go to homepartners.com, can you see my screen, Brian?
We can. You're doing great.
And then you go to Rent Estimator. Just click no for, is it on the MLS? Log in here quick. Typically don't have to log in, but.
Technology works great, except when it doesn't, right?
I'm telling you. Then it shuts down their site. And this is key because now once you figure out what the rent amount is, oh, crazy. All right, so anyways, we can pretend. So it'll say, is the property, I mean, you know where to go. You guys aren't dumb. You guys will figure it out. Is a property currently listed on the MLS? It'll make me log in. Just make an account, then go here. Next question is like what the taxes are, what the annual taxes are, what the address is. Guys, it's critical. You can check, you can run the address to make sure that it's in a Home Partners approved community. Then it'll ask if it has a finished basement, because that adds on to the rent. It has a homeowners association, and then it'll also ask if there's one more thing. I'm trying to think of what it is. I wish it would pop up, but you'll be able to figure it out. You can pull the tax information from the county records or whatever, and then it'll literally populate what the rent would be. Oh, the purchase price, right? So if your investor's like, hey, we're going to list it at $299.9, put the purchase price in there, it'll populate exactly what the rent is. And then you go and market that rent, just consumer facing everything, just say rent is estimated, it'll roughly be around this amount, just so that, no one's getting upset if it's not the correct rent amount. But
so
again,
basically, I'm going to fill that out, and it's going to I'm going to put in 123 Main Street in Minnesota, and I'm going to put all the data in there. Then it's going to kick back to me that basically if they were going to rent, if Home Partners buys this house, they'll rent it for $2,500 a month.
You got it.
Okay.
And then
So are you doing that before you go on a listing appointment so you can share that with the seller?
I am, for obvious reasons. I don't want to talk about it if it's not in an approved community.
Sure.
So, yep. So I just double check the address. You can even do it right from your phone. I've done that. If I've just, running from appointment to appointment, check the address on my phone. Great. It is an approved community. And then I go into why that's so great. You can market a listing for rent, way before you're going to put it on the MLS. If they're still doing touch-ups and stuff like that, especially for investments like flipping properties, you just get 3 to 7 pictures: kitchen, master bath, outside, backyard, family room. Renters, all they need to see is the quality, and they're going to hit you up, and you can show the property and potentially get it sold. Home Partners will buy it for sale by owners. They'll buy pre-list with dual agency. We've done a bunch of those. So I think it's an absolute no-brainer to get in the door with people ahead of the game. If they're not ready to list, well, hey, we do have this other option. It's a great way to gauge the market as well, if you're not getting a lot of leads, etc. So that's been huge to our listing presentation and just our overall success.
Yeah, it sounds like you're here's one of the things that I've been saying for the last few years, and I say the year, but in 2019, I firmly believe that being different in and of itself almost makes you stand out. Now, I prefer different and better. I'm not just different, but the reality is that, every agent, I've been saying this for a couple of years too. There's so much information out there. None of us are failing in business because there's not enough information. There's more information available today than there ever was before. So, we all have very similar listing presentations. We all learned the same scripts. We've all done this. Those of us who are trying to perform at a high level, like Neal. So, I love that you've come up with just a tweak, because if someone's talking to 5 people, and realistically today, I remember starting in real estate, you went to a listing appointment, if you missed it, it was because you were really crappy, because they weren't talking to anybody else. As long as you did a decent job and got along with the seller, they listed their house. Nowadays they're talking to 3, 4, 5, 7 people. They're looking at Zillow Instant Offer. There's so many moving parts out there. So you've got to be different. And I love the fact that you're coming with something that's unique, it's different, and it adds value. And, think about that just in general as you're out working with buyers, working with sellers, is if your value proposition is, I'm going to do a great job, I'm going to show up on time, you need a better value proposition, because everybody, that's the minimum standard out there, guys. We've got to bring something else. And, it's interesting too. Someone I was talking to the other day said, well, I'm selling a $300,000 house and it's $9,000 commission. And I'm assuming 6%, by the way. It's not $9,000 commission. It's $18,000 commission. You're selling a $500,000 house. It's not $15,000 commission. It's $30,000 commission. Yes, that's our side that we split with our companies. But you got to remember, the seller doesn't care where that check goes. Yeah. The $30,000 still comes off of them. We have to show value. And I love that we've got, you're coming up with additional things to do that. So let's talk real quick about some of the problems, and not to be negative, but it's great. I'm sure, how many of these transactions have you done approximately? Do you have a number?
With my referral partners, close to 174.
Okay. So my guess is you've never seen everything. Anyone who says they've seen everything scares me. But doing over 170 transactions this way, what kind of pitfalls? What are some of the things that you've learned? Maybe some of us who are watching can take a shortcut and, no offense, not make some of the mistakes you made just because you didn't know.
I'm glad you brought that up. It was a year before I finally realized some of the things that Home Partners would always call an inspection. So they have changed some of their guidelines for houses that they will and won't purchase. The house has to be updated, and any age of the house prior to 1980 has to be updated.
So define updated, because that's kind of a vague
term.
Good
question. Bathrooms or kitchen updates, right? Granite, stainless, etc. They just don't want to deal with old houses. They pretty much became a landlord overnight. So they just they have the data, they just don't want to do it. So move-in ready, the first place I'm going to, in the house is the mechanicals room. They call out old stuff that they're going to have to replace during that 2 weeks of make ready: furnace, water heater, air conditioning. I'm not an expert, but this has really helped me become better at identifying older mechanicals. Huge. The breaker box, stuff like that. And then just the overall condition, because they do a really good job of doing an inspection, but then negotiating the inspection. So that's been a huge hurdle, is just making sure that you're realistic with the buyers. If or the prospective residents, if we're walking through a house and they're like, hey, we could update this, and it's like, well, Home Partners isn't going to buy it. You know what I mean? So you only have a certain number of tries before the resident's like, I'm not going to do this anymore. Like, it's too, I wanted that house, it didn't work. I wanted that house, it didn't work. Right. So now we've gotten to know what they've bought, just going through those, that number of transactions. So the nicer the house is, the better. That brings me back to the higher rent. It's not about getting paid more. It's honest to God, it is the likelihood that transaction happens, likelihood of a happy prospective resident, etc. So that's been I would say, the biggest hurdle, but I've learned a ton as well. Sellers will take a lot less than you think they will. They will negotiate an inspection period. The way Home Partners does it is quite genius. So there's that. On top of the seller taking less than you think they will pay above list price. They're typically 95% to 105% of list price. If there's multiple offers, they will pay more than list, just they're not some investor lowballing everybody. They will pay what it's worth. So there's my 2 cents on that.
So let me ask you this. So some of the things that have just kind of, and I'll be honest, I've never done a single one of these transactions. Yeah. So Neal's the expert, not me. I'm just having these thoughts as I go along. So if I was in an ideal world, and I know we don't live there, I want a roof that's less than 10 years old, heat and air that's less than 10 years old, AC that's less than 10 years old. Do you try and focus on that stuff? Do you go through the MLS, talk to the listing agent, find that information out before you go and show them a house? Because it sounds like you could walk into a great house, like, a house that I bought, for example, in 2014. It's a great house, but I had to replace the heat and air almost immediately because it was 15 years old and it just started to fail. It wasn't a bad house, but I can see Home Partners of America going, hey, that AC is 15 years old. We know sometime in the next 3 years, we're going to have to, get rid of that. We want to deal with it now. So what's that process look like? And, how are you making sure that you're not showing houses as much as possible that you're going to not close on?
Very good question. So newer the house is, the better, of course. Another thing is when you're walking through the house, I look for additions, anything that maybe the seller did themselves or any DIYs. No permits that were pulled. It's an absolute, Home Partners won't mess with it. I will say I do not reach out to the agent to check the age. When I'm walking through a house, when I first see it, I'm like, Home Partners will buy it. Then I'm walking through the house and my percentage is either going higher or lower, right? Based on what I see. So that's kind of where I have a reality check with the prospective resident. If like there's just some weird stuff that weren't in pictures, like the odds, we can try, like, don't get me wrong, but the odds are lower than whatever. So I won't necessarily reach out to the agent. I will definitely look at the seller's disclosures though. If I know that the prospective resident loves it, mostly looking at the age of roof, like you brought up, and the permits to make sure that all permits were pulled, and then any, insurance claims and stuff like that, make sure that the seller said that they did all the repairs, through a contractor and stuff like that.
Good. And I imagine there's some scripts that go along with this, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I was working with one of these people, I would politely let them know that they kind of suck as a buyer. So, again, politely, I'm not going to say that, but I'm going to say, look, guys, you have some restrictions. And because of that, we're going to narrow it down to this group of houses that are going to qualify. And I know that you love this house built in 1974 on 2 acres that has a pool and a barn. I appreciate that, but that is not your situation. Get your credit score up, get some more income, then we'll go look at that. So I've got to believe more than just even a regular buyer, you have to maintain control. And I think I would be pretty aggressive on the front. Guys, I can do this for you. However, please understand, these are the boxes that we have to fit in. Are you okay with that? And are you doing stuff like that to make sure that you're not out showing houses and wasting your time?
Well, I will show houses, and if that has to get brought up, I like to stay, unless I have to, I keep negative out. I know you want to set the reality, but unless I have to, I'm not going to. So a lot of times, when I'm training an agent in and we're doing like a home partners thing and they're showing a tenant, they'll say, hey, well, home partners won't even buy it. The tenant will be like, number one, it raises red flags. Number two, it's like, oh, I didn't like this one anyways. So I wait till they show some sort of interest before I bring up like, hey, all I want to do is make sure that this happens, right? You're happy, you get the house that you absolutely love, that you want to, live in for as long as you want, potentially purchase it, right? This is what I know. Home partners needs move-in ready, a couple red flags, not saying it's a deal breaker. I'm just letting you know, there's time. The biggest obstacle is the time, right? You have the 10-day inspection that's required for home partners, and they wait till that last day. So if you only have 7-8 weeks, you only have one house to try on. So, you can always go back to that house or just let them know like, hey, from my experience, the odds aren't as good. Like they might get it under contract, but then they'll find the old furnace, the roof is old, and they'll call it out, and then maybe we can't negotiate to purchase the property after inspection. Gotcha. So I found my best success keeping the negative out until they love a house that I don't think home partners will buy. And it's worked.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And, I love that. I heard you say a couple of things today that I really love. It doesn't feel like you're overqualifying people. And as real estate agents, as a group, I'm not talking about those watching Club Wealth TV necessarily. We do have a tendency to overqualify. And I feel like we lose transactions. So we're so 100%. Busy qualifying. And by the way, the reason I say that is, no one wants to feel like they're being overqualified, so, do that subtly, get an idea what someone wants, but, go and meet people in person. I love that you said that too, that the first place I'm going to try and do that is in a house, because the reality is if they've spoken to other agents, they've probably gotten this. Oh, you're not approved by a lender. Oh, your credit score is below 600. Oh, I don't have time, attention, detail for you. So my guess is, and again, not personally have done this, showing up and showing these people that you have something for them and you're willing to work with them. I'm going to guess you get a ton of referrals from it. I'm going to guess that the people really appreciate what you're doing. It kind of reminds me back when I started in 2005, we probably got some people in the houses who shouldn't, but that's a different story. But we really worked our butts off getting people with not such good credit and helping them and structuring stuff. Those people were clients for life because we bent over backwards for them. It sounds like you're doing the same thing with home partners, and it sounds like you're doing a great job with it. So we've got about 30 seconds left, Neal. I'm just gonna, final thoughts. What's one last thing that you want to say to the audience that they need to know about the Home Partners Program?
Use it. Sign up. Unless you're in the Twin Cities, I hope you're not watching. But yeah, definitely sign up. Get registered, do the certification, and I'm an open book. clubwealth.com/Neal Lawson. Get the PDF that you can add to your listing presentation. Like I said, I'm an open book. Find me on Facebook and BSM. I'm speaking there, so make sure that you come and say hi.
Absolutely. So, I'll kind of conclude with that. If you have questions, Neal's already said he's happy to talk to you. We really appreciate that. That's that giving back spirit that we were kind of talking about. So thank you so much for doing that. And thank you for being on today. So much amazing information. And, Neal's got that download. Get that download. And more importantly, go to BSM. Neal will be there. Get an opportunity to talk to him. He'll walk you through it, I promise. And so thanks, everybody, today. Neal, thank you so much for being on. And I look forward to seeing you here in a couple of months at BSM.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, everybody.